Welcome back, educator. This is Cool Cat Teacher Talk. Today, we start talking about personal branding, what to teach kids, what educators are doing to give themselves a positive reputation so we can set our careers up for success wherever we go.
Ever wondered how remarkable teaching happens? Find out right now at Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis. Get insights from top educators, tech tips, and inspiration to elevate your teaching.
Today, I'm kicking off the show with the latest headlines, the practical, the helpful, and sometimes just the interesting news that impacts our classrooms. All the resources I mentioned will be available at coolcatteacher.com/talk26. But the best way to stay up to date is by subscribing to my weekly newsletter. First of all, while AI continues to reshape education, there is a fascinating disconnect emerging. According to a new EdWeek Research Center study, nearly 7 in 10 math teachers haven't received professional development on using AI. Of those who haven't received training, 34% don't want it. There was one survey respondent that said AI takes the thinking away from students and they think it's the answer to everything. There should be less automation and more thinking. But this highlights a larger trend that we're seeing in AI professional development. Technology adoption is not just about having access to the tech or having the training. We have to address teachers' philosophical concerns about when and how AI should be used. But not all math teachers are opposed to AI. Education Week reported that the Florida Virtual School has launched an innovative course that combines AI literacy with Algebra 1. An HMH survey found that 73% of teachers say AI saves them time, even if only 10% are using it in the classroom with students. In our next news, China recently announced that all students in Beijing will receive mandatory AI training next fall. Meanwhile, other countries like Singapore, Finland, and Canada are requiring AI to be taught in elementary school. As a recent op-ed in the 74 argued, AI is becoming the new space race and issued a wake-up call to all of Americans to understand that we need to be teaching about how AI works as a strategic issue. So I think you can expect to see a lot of response happening in the legislative area. It might be a good idea to get ahead of the curve. But remember the difference between teaching how AI works from having students glued to that screen. In the show notes, I'm going to include a video called How to Understand Computer Science Education in Schools, where I talk about all the different grade levels, but also how we can teach computational thinking without a computer at all. But speaking of AI, Nature magazine reports on a study showing how AI-boosted cameras are helping blind people navigate 25% better than the traditional white cane. There are researchers developing AI systems that use webcam eye tracking to identify students' math strengths and weaknesses. They're watching it where a student looks on the screen and they're creating something called a heat map. They believe this shows a lot of promise for personalized learning, but I have some really serious ethical concerns. So if you look at some research from Springer, they said that gaze patterns can reveal a lot more information than somebody might realize. It can give sensitive data about students' biometric identity because think about it, you're getting a picture of the eye, their personal traits, their emotional state, whether they're using medicine or not, certain drugs they might have in their system, their racial background, and even sexual preferences. As we say in the South, just because you can peek through a window doesn't mean you should. And I feel like we need to start asking these privacy questions about our students and what we're doing. This is why I think every school needs to license some AI platform for their school. But remember, not all AI platforms are alike. And some of the free services, they're just trying to use that data as well. We know there's going to be a shakedown and some of these tools may go away, just like they did in the early days of the internet. Who uses Yahoo anymore, right? Or AOL. We want to protect that data that people are collecting on our students and on us. There is some technology that can cross a privacy line that we shouldn't be willing to cross. Next, there are some new tools changing how we work. For those using Gmail and Google Calendar and Claude AI, it can be set up by administrators to access those services. Or you can also set it up on your personal account if that's allowed. It unlocks some impressive features for organizing your digital life. Microsoft's Copilot Vision is a new feature in the Edge browser. It lets Copilot see what's on your screen. It can highlight parts of your screen, but it will not click for you. This is kind of like the stream feature inside Google AI Studio. And that feature will actually tutor you and help you through just about any kind of software. I have some questions about what could Copilot do in terms of seeing what students are trying to do and giving them answers. I think this is something that if you have Windows on your campus and you're deploying Copilot, you should check out. In political news, a U.S. House panel has declared DeepSeek, the AI tool that came out of China, a national security issue. Furthermore, information from copy leaks showed a concerning 74.2% match between DeepSeek's output and that of ChatGPT. It raises questions about how the model was trained. And you might say, hey, all these models are alike. Well, actually, they only found like a 0.7% match with Microsoft Copilot, no match with Claude. Fundamentally, the outputs are different. So the only way for there to be that high a match would be that DeepSeek literally trained it on ChatGPT. In our next news, Google Classroom has two big features for the end of the year. First, there's a silent reading mode in Google's Read Along feature that focuses on comprehension rather than oral reading metrics. This can create a less stressful reading environment for students who struggle with reading aloud. You're still getting the comprehension data, just not some of the other detailed data that's also very helpful. Remember, Microsoft Immersive Reader has a lot of cool features too. So those are kind of the two most popular reading support AI tools out right now. Second, Google Classroom now offers bulk grading. It lets you grade multiple assignments simultaneously. So if you have 6 students with 100, you can just check and do the bulk grading feature. If you want to use it, go to Google Classroom student work page, select the multiple students, and click on the bulk actions menu. As somebody who is going to be grading after I finish recording, this is arrived at a perfect time for me. This next piece is not tech news. New research shows that touching just one receipt with BPS, bisphenol S. But if you touch it for just 10 seconds, it can expose you to unsafe levels of this hormone disrupting chemical linked to cancer and reproductive dysfunction. The Center for Environmental Health has taken legal actions against dozens of retailers, including Burger King, Cheesecake Factory, Gap, McDonald's, Victoria's Secret, Staples, and many, many others. So many of us handle receipts all the time. So we might need to consider going digital. Avoid using hand sanitizer before you touch the receipt because it increases absorption. And wash hands thoroughly afterwards. Now, this might make an interesting discussion in your chemistry or your science classes. Now, I'd like to give you a quick test prep tip. As I prepare my students for their AP tests, I don't review everything. Who has time for that? So several weeks ago, I gave them a practice test to identify their weaknesses. And inside AP Classroom, I have all of their weaknesses by standard number. So I have been focusing my reviews, starting with the weakest and moving up the scale. I also have taught my students how to see their individual weaknesses and allow them to ask for special tutoring from me on their weaknesses. So whatever systems you use, be strategic when you review. When you use Gimkit, Blookit, quizzes, or whatever tool you use for formative assessment, align them with standards, analyze the results, see where students are weak. This formative assessment approach helps us target our review while keeping it engaging. We don't want to just over-test and wear them out before it's time for the real test. But we do need to have the data so that we can know where to focus. I'm Vicki Davis, the Cool Cat teacher, and I'd love to hear your questions for our new Ask Me Anything segment that we want to include in the show. Email your questions to newsletter@coolcatteacher.com. This is the Cool Cat Teacher Talk Show. I am Vicki Davis, and I'm joined today with my producer and son, John.
Hello.
A man of few words unless he has something amazing to say. So all of us have a personal brand, whether we realize it or not. The question is, what does your digital footprint say about you? And you might say, hey, Vicki, I'm not on social media. So we're going to explore why this matters for teachers and students alike. But we're also going to get into this term, Influencer. What do you think about the word influencer, John?
It brings to mind about what specific change you want to make by posting content. Do you want to make the world a better place by uploading your content into the world for everyone to see? Because once it's out there, it's not going away.
And it could be out there for good or for bad. And, when people say, I want to be an influencer. Okay, first of all, I don't really like that term because we all have influence. That somehow implies that certain people are endowed with influence and the rest of people don't matter. Nope. All of us have influence. If you have children, you are one of the most important people in that child's world. That's your area of influence. We all have influence. How do we want to use that? We influence people for good or for bad. So this is going to be the first of a few episodes where we're going to dive into personal branding, social media, some surprising trends about all the different generations and where they're sharing and what they're doing. We're also going to talk about some practical tips, tools, and even how I use AI in my own personal branding and what tools I use. A lot of these things are going to be things I have never shared publicly, but I have done as a result of 20 years of blogging and podcasting and speaking and writing books. These are all things that if you're considering, okay, what am I going to do? Am I going to do something on the side? I have a child who's interested in this sort of environment and sharing. What do I need to know? So today we're going to set the foundation.
To find the show notes, you can go to coolcatteacher.com/brand tips.
A personal brand is the perception others have of you. Okay. We could just call it reputation. When I graduated from high school, Miss Lowe, my guidance counselor, made me a cross-stitch little sign that I have always kept by my bed. A good name is better to be had than great riches, because the truth is your name and your reputation is a sort of wealth that not everybody has. A good reputation. Now, that doesn't mean everybody likes you. That doesn't mean you're everybody's cup of tea. But what it does mean is that you have behaved with integrity. So all of us have a brand because we all have a reputation. Whether we're intentional about it or not, we have one. So if something happens in your school and they blog about you, that's part of your digital footprint. If you're on LinkedIn, that's part of your digital footprint. You have to ask yourself, when somebody looks me up, what are they going to find? When somebody looks my students up, what are they going to find? Sometimes there have been surprising situations where a student didn't get into college, and sometimes it goes back to their social media. And if they've spoken ill of teachers, if they've shared content that wasn't favorable, and colleges and employers now research candidates. I know when I moved schools 7 years ago, they researched me deeply to see what I had shared online.
Yeah. And especially whenever you have things like the Internet Archive that literally saves a snapshot of the internet. It'll be there even if you delete it.
That's right. You really can't delete things. So people say digital footprint, but the statement is it's a digital tattoo, not going anywhere. So the other thing that I want to introduce you to is a concept of algorithm proofing. So algorithm proofing your career and your online reputation means that you're not just relying on one platform. It's a good idea for all of us to, quote, have a landing page or some place that we kind of put together the good things. Now, some people say, hey, I don't want to be online. Well, here's the deal. You're online whether you want to be or not. Just ask some of the professors who've had unkind things said about them on Rate My Professors. When somebody looks something up, what do you want them to find? Do you want them to find good content that you've created and examples and things that you've curated? Or do you want them to find what some random person said about you that may or not even be you? Algorithm proofing means that you don't put all your eggs in one social media basket. So, for example, one social media platform I'm really known for is Twitter. I got in on the early days of Twitter. My friend Steve Dembo told me about it. There was a time where when I got on Twitter, I thought, it was so cool. And it's like, you know what? I just remember working so hard to try to earn the following of 100 people. So when I had 100 followers, it's like, wow. And then I was like, well, maybe what would happen if I had 1,000? So I was like, worked so hard. And okay, 1,000 people have chosen to put me in their feed by following me. And I was like, wow, that really means something. Well, I wonder what 10,000 would feel like. Okay, so 10,000 to 50,000 to 100,000 to 150,000. Let me tell you something. This is what I tell my students. I didn't feel any different at any of those stages. Sometimes, my students will say, oh, you have 150,000 followers on Twitter. That means you're, quote, famous. Okay, whatever that, quote, famous stuff is, it's A, it's temporary, if at all. And B, it's usually fictitious. It's usually not true. The question I ask myself is, am I making the lives of people who follow my content better? Am I improving it? Am I teaching them something? Am I helping? When a lot of people started leaving Twitter because they got upset with Elon Musk and they went to Blue Sky. Well, if everything I had was built around Twitter, then I would be in trouble. If everything I had was built around Google, I'd be in trouble. I have a really good mailing list with a high open rate, and I send out a weekly newsletter, and I have a blog. These are things that are part of my personal algorithm proofing strategy. And even then, it can be a challenge. We're going to talk more about the different types of brands you can have after this first segment. But when kids think about branding, like teenagers or those in college, which that's more your age group, what do you have to say about positives and mistakes that you see people make?
A lot of mistakes is they try to sell merch way too early. Like a lot of the smaller content creators try to sell things to their audience to make a quick buck out of it when it really hurts their image in other people's eyes. But a positive is like if you're using your audience to try to send a positive message out, that people tend to associate you with that kind of thing if you become pseudo famous.
Yeah. Yeah, pseudo famous is a good way to put it because here's the thing, it comes and goes. And the moment you stop sharing, people forget about you. I mean, I saw that when I broke my foot and people didn't entirely forget about me. But I'll never forget the day before I had foot surgery. I had broken my foot, couldn't walk. I got a note from ICS Research that they were going to name me the top edruptor in the world. And I remember thinking, yeah, I'll better enjoy it because I'm not going to be sharing a lot because I don't trust myself when I'm on pain meds to be writing, honestly. No telling what I would write in that case. So I knew I was going to have to take a break. But you know what? I'm still here and I'm still sharing. And I really appreciated that honor. But if there's a hole in your heart, no award could ever be enough. I've learned that as somebody who liked to earn awards in academics. You get this academic award and okay, what's next? You get this award and okay, what's next? So for me, a big part of brand is knowing that my identity is not wrapped up in how many likes I get or how many people follow me. That's not my identity. I think that's an important thing to share with kids. We're joined by Elisabeth Bostwick for this first segment. She's got a book, Take the Leap, about school culture and so many other things. Today, Liz, we're going to talk about a really cool topic, which is authentic learning as well as helping kids to develop their personal brands. How did you get interested in this work and how is it looking with kids?
Well, with most of my work, it really does come from just my own experiences of having my own two kids. It's my 20-year-old in particular who I was able to really see the things he was doing to create his own brand in some of the work that he's doing, but also as he was heading off to college. I also could recognize some gaps that were needed within my own kiddos, but then just high school students in general, just understanding how they can leverage social media for their own personal brand.
That's a really interesting topic. But, there's some people who would say, hey, Liz, those kids are on social media enough and you're going to do it in school.
A lot of this doesn't necessarily mean that we're putting our kids more on social media. So if we were to break this down into bite-sized steps, we'd really be stepping back and beginning with helping our kids understand what are their strengths, what are their passions, what are their interests, what do they want them to walk away, what perception do they want to create that's authentic and meaningful to them. It's not necessarily placing our kids on social media more. It's more about helping them to identify who they are as an individual and essentially how they want to communicate that to the world, whether it is college admissions, it could be even if they're going into college sports or professional sports, even just careers in the workforce.
I do an app project every semester with my ninth graders where they develop an app. And used to, I had them turn in a team report. I said, you're going to create a TikTok like or a reel like video report for me every day to kind of let me know what your team is doing. And I had better reports, more engagement, more fun, more excitement on that project because I was letting them communicate in a way that they understood and they were developing real world skills. So even though over half of my kids are not on social media, using that method helped them. So what are some of the things you're doing with kids?
So this does connect to my book of Take the Leap, Ignite a Culture of Innovation, because we're really thinking about how do we create authentic and meaningful learning experiences, just like you're talking about. So even if we're not in school saying, hey, use the social media platform, this can look like taking a tool such as Canva, and there are other tools too that you can use. One thing that I really like that I do for myself is I do create websites in Canva. They're very simple. They function similarly to creating a presentation. Kids can go in, they can develop like, what do they want their brand colors? What colors represent the work that you're doing? Are you engaging in sports, music, clubs in school? And now how do you put that together in a way that you can showcase that visually? It's very much similar to like a digital portfolio, but it could also incorporate academics, but really thinking about who the person is as a whole.
So tell me a story about helping a child develop their personal brand or a student developing their personal brand and just sort of that journey that the student went on.
We did some of this at a different level, even with fourth grade students. This is a student who didn't necessarily shine within reading or math or your classic academic topics in school. However, what she could, and at the time we were using Google Sites as well, but at that time she could come in and without very much guidance at all, she would be able to connect the dots of how to build everything, how to make those connections. Also really took to coding, video creation. And what was really neat about that is that other students noticed the strengths in her. So not only did this engage her and hook her in from some of the off-task behaviors that she'd do to avoid engaging in reading or writing or math because it wasn't what she felt was her strong suit, but not only was she more engaged, but her peers recognized her strengths, and that really helped her confidence take off. So we can apply that across the board to any student. When we create the culture for that in our classrooms, we really set our students up for success.
I've seen students who are good at graphic design and maybe not as great in other subjects, but when they start shining in graphic design, you can just feel how much pride they have as their peers start saying, what do you think about this design? And where do I need to move this? And how can I make this look better? And they're constantly almost like being a consultant to their classmates because this is a different type of skill. I mean, this is real world. I do want to talk about your entrepreneurs in your business students. Do you have a story from that work you're doing right now?
I will say a lot of them haven't considered how they're showcasing who they are in social media. So that was kind of a big topic. I saw a lot of chuckles around the room when we started. I had a question up on the screen that said, think about a social media post that you may have seen somebody within your high school make that you saw and you're thinking that probably never should have gone out there. So of course, these are 17, 18-year-olds. And some of them are making eye contact. Like they know that certain things shouldn't be out there. However, I will say students, and the same can apply to adults, don't always think about how they're communicating about who they are on social media. And so a lot of this comes back to authentic storytelling. How do we, staying authentic to who we are, create a story that other people can look back on and be able to connect the dots to, this is where somebody started, this is where they're growing, this is where they're developing, and you can kind of see the development of that person. So again, coming back to sharing experiences, volunteer work, projects, lessons that they might have learned, especially being able to share their reflections on anything that they've done, I think really can show just personal values too.
So we do a Shark Tank with our app project, and the kids create just these fantastic apps that meet all different kinds of needs. It's a very social entrepreneurship type thing. And it And it really is transformational when students do real world work. And isn't one of their big questions, why does this matter? Isn't that part of authentic learning?
Absolutely. These are skill sets that they're going to use beyond the classroom, from video creation to, and we even talk about like not just sharing photos on social media, but how do you bring it into a template and add elements and apply your brand color? Things don't have to feel polished all of the time, because sometimes scrappy can also showcase a brand as well. So it just depends on what you're communicating. We've taken different LinkedIn pages. Some have been current college students. And then I did find a couple of adults that might appear like they are close to being in college age still. They're young enough. It was really neat to break down, why does this LinkedIn profile, why does this work? And what are the strengths of it? And even like, why might something not work? So we tried to find various examples, like LinkedIn. That's really where a lot of college kids are beginning to understand the importance of networking and building your digital portfolio there. It was neat to be able to take a couple that weren't as polished and professional looking, because the brand might be showcasing graphic design. It's got a completely different visual feel to it. And some of the kids were like, well, that one's not as professional. So we got to break down, well, what are they trying to communicate? What are they telling a story about who they are and the work that they do?
So as we finish up, Liz, talk to all the students out here who are listening to you thinking, is my personal brand important? And when do I start building it?
Well, I think there is never a wrong time to get started. I think you can get started anytime. And again, you can start small. I know that some colleges will look at, colleges, workforce will look people up on social media. So it doesn't mean that we can't share things about our dog or our family. I sure do. But at the same time, we can get started by thinking about the things that we do in school, whether it's an activity, something you're volunteering, a project you're a part of, any sports that you're involved in, music, and begin sharing pictures and just keeping simple captions. If you're not comfortable sharing quite yet on social media, create it in a Google site or a Canvas site or anything similar where you can put together that digital portfolio, because that can also be linked at any point to any social media channel. Or you can like a social media profile, like in your bio section, or you can take any of those images or videos that you create and later upload those. So you can kind of begin capturing things anywhere and then deciding how you're most comfortable sharing.
A lot of college applications now have a hyperlink box where you can put the hyperlink, and my students will take their web pages from 8th grade, update them for being a senior, and hit publish, and they've got it there. You know, they've got all the structure, the skeletal part, and then they just add a little bit to it. So having that brand is important, but students also have to remember, it's not like they can just have a nice little polished LinkedIn, because companies, they have whole departments for investigating potential employees and looking at all the social media of people. So being wise about your personal brand everywhere you share is just so important. Where do you recommend students go, the resources to help them as they develop their personal brand?
There are all kinds of resources that you can find out there. I actually have a couple on my website, so you can always go there. I've also found things on Common Sense Media. My website is ElisabethBostwick.com. It is Elisabeth with an S, not a Z.
Well, thank you, Liz, for the many times you've answered the call to come on the show. I just appreciate that you're working with kids. I think one of the most important things I look for in educational leaders is that their passion to teach remains and that they continue to work with students, because students have changed a lot in the last few years. So thanks, Liz. I hope you've gotten some ideas from Liz about the things you can talk to your students about as it relates to personal branding. Her show will air on a future episode of the 10-Minute Teacher, so subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. So right now, we're going to talk about some of the types of personal brands. There's a thought leader brand. That type of person kind of provides expertise and insights. I've always hesitated to use the term thought leader. Sometimes self-appointed thought leaders, you're kind of like, okay, I'm not so sure about that. So you may be taking that approach, but that doesn't mean you have to put that in your bio. They're a thought leader. There's a creator brand that really tries to produce valuable content. There's an educator type brand that likes to teach and share knowledge. There's an advocate brand that champions important causes or companies. And then there's an integrated personal brand that kind of shows all aspects of your authentic self. And I think that while I started as, okay, I'm just going to write about education technology, and I still write a ton about education technology just because I'm a programmer. I've been using a computer since I was 7. I like computers. I like to program. I like technology. It's my hobby. So all of these things, I'm going to write about ed tech and technology a lot, but I love teaching, and teaching is a tough thing. So I want to talk about that. And I think one big thing you have to be careful, whatever approach you take, is in holding yourself up as the quote perfect teacher, because your parents are listening to you and your colleagues are listening to you. You can think somebody has clear skin, but if you get really close, you're going to see they don't. The closer you get to somebody, the more flaws you see. And so I'm dealing with parent struggles, or I was misunderstood, or I said something wrong. I make mistakes and have to apologize to my class when I make those mistakes. I'm not a perfect teacher. There is value in being a teacher and speaking from the experience of being a teacher. And so that's part of what I try to do. The other thing is early on, I figured out that people were following what I was doing. They didn't want it to be all about me. And that's why I wanted to interview people and bring people on the shows. I like to say, if there's a spotlight on me, I'm going to get out a mirror and let's shine it on other remarkable, amazing people out there, because I would like to, when I am done, my body of work to be the kind of stuff that could be listened to in 20 and 30 years, where people remember teaching is noble, teaching is hard, but it's worth it. So, John, what do you think about branding and this struggle to kind of be authentic, but also be professional?
I think that people take it a bit too far into the extreme and put on a mask when they make content. And that can lead to some serious mental health issues where people do what's called the crashing out. It's a term I believe my generation came up with it. It's a step below going postal, where people just snap after a series of just stress just piles up onto them, and they start acting out of character from what is usually known for them.
Well, and you can't measure yourself by how many people follow you or how many people view stuff, because truthfully, the algorithms favor things that may not be more positive. If you mess up, you're going to get a whole lot more people following you than when you do things right or when you speak truth. At one point, I interviewed one of the top educators on TikTok, and I asked that person, what was one of your top videos? She said, "Oh, I got this device that when my friend got bit by a bug at an amusement park, I put it on there and I popped this little button and it made it so that it pulled the venom out so that the bug bite didn't hurt and she didn't scratch it." And it got all these millions of views. And I'm thinking, seriously? So not every platform is something that fits with me. Right now, I share all my stuff to TikTok. I don't really nurture that experience, because truthfully, the stuff that goes viral on TikTok is not usually the best stuff, particularly here in the US. I know the algorithm for the equivalent of TikTok in China is totally different. Really talks about education and STEM and lots of positive things. But here in the US, it's more negative things. I don't necessarily focus on that particular platform, although I do share the content there. And see, that's part of what we're going to go into, is making those strategic decisions. Where am I going to share? Where am I not going to share? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? One of my most popular blog posts I've ever shared is one called "What to Do When Someone Hates You." And so I actually wrote that out of an experience. And a previous pastor, Michael Catt, once said that the average person leaves a job because of 8 people. And it's hard when you feel like somebody hates you, but that was my experience. When I published it, it was significantly after when all of this had happened. So I do something called linking my letters. So Abraham Lincoln, when he died, they found a desk drawer full of letters that he had written about really negative letters to his generals, just blasting them for how they were failing in the Civil War. Well, he never mailed those because he put them in his drawer and he decided, well, I made them later. And most of the ones he did not mail. So I write something and I stick it in a certain place, and then I'll pull it out later and I say, hey, are there any timeless truths here? Are there any things that I can share that will lift somebody up and help them? what can I do to improve their lives based on this? And do I need to take any personal information out? As educators, we have to be really careful not to write anything negative about students, nothing negative about parents, and even admins and colleagues. We have to be really careful about that because we can lose our job for any of that stuff if it's misconstrued. So now we're going to go to another segment. I am so excited today to have Dr. Will Deyamport with us today. On Twitter, he is I am Dr. Will. You have a new book out called The Edupreneur, The Blueprint to Jumpstart and Scale Your Education Business. You have been helping edupreneurs. You have a podcast that has 719 episodes, and you've been doing this for quite some time. What is your passion for helping us educators create education businesses?
About having ownership over their lives, their careers, and their finances. Well, I guess, normally when you become a teacher or whatever, you get into the field, you don't think of, I could be fired, right? You don't put yourself in the same situation as other people who get these layoffs and one of these things. But it can happen.
Yeah.
Several years ago, I myself was in a situation where there was a former tech director. I was in the tech department at the time, and myself and other instructional technologists were planning our summer boot camp. So we had with teachers, and we were communicating in Slack, and I was like, "Hey, I got to do something with this teacher. When I'm done, I'm heading over your way." And our supervisor at the time was like, "I need to talk to y'all." I was like, "Whoa, what?" Because normally that doesn't happen. And so he got to us and said, "Hey, there's some budget situations. You may not have your job."
Oh, my.
And before then, I had envisioned me staying in this district till retirement. And I'm not saying that it won't happen, but I never thought that this would happen to me. I'm just saying that once that happened, it made me sort of re-examine my place and think about, yes, I want to be here, but I also need to prepare myself so that the school district isn't my sole place of income.
Well, my dad, who was a farmer, always advised me. He said, "Vicki, if you work for yourself, you always have a job." So literally, even when I was in the tech business and traveling, I have always had, people call them a side hustle now. I don't like to call them that because it's like a calling for me, the stuff I do on the side, just like it is for you. Although you're a district instructional technology director for K-12, you do these things when you're at home because it's your passion. And I think, doesn't that make the best education business, that like this is just an outgrowth of who you are as an educator, right? And see, here's the thing. When I go to conferences, I want to hear people in the classroom. I want to hear people doing instructional tech. I want to hear principals who are in their offices. So to me, this actually improves all of education when you have people who are doing this now, because it's changing so rapidly with AI in the classroom. Everything is changing. Biggest revolution since the internet was started. And we need practitioners to turn around and help other practitioners, don't we?
Yeah. And, that's where, in the book, I talk about how to build your education business, you want to look at what you're currently doing in the classroom, and look at what you have a passion for, what you're doing well, what you're excited about, what people are asking you to do, and figure out how you can take that to solve one problem, right? You're not trying to be Walmart out here, but you want to solve one specific problem that your target audience is having issues with, what are their pain points? And so you want to start to build your business around that idea.
So you're talking, creating a legitimate business, helping other educators, because you know that there is the growth of what we call the quote education influencer. Sometimes my name and your name have both been on those lists, but a lot of it seems to center around dancing in the classroom and stuff that I'm sorry, it's just not things sometimes that I feel like don't well represent our profession. I'm not going to talk bad about my parents. I have amazing parents. I have amazing students. Yes, crazy stuff happens, but there's like some fueling of resentment that's happening. And we're talking about productive building up education.
Well, yes, I think with any educator who is thinking, I want to do this for real and be intentional about it, because what happened to me, but it's happened to people who's been on my podcast, it's like you are going to conferences, you're speaking, you're presenting, and then one day someone walks up to you and says, "Hey, would you come to my school district and you do this?"
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah. And so you do it, and you're caught off guard because you haven't planned for this, right? You don't know how this goes, and you do it, and you get that first check like I did, and I was like, oh, not only did I have a great time working with these teachers, but I like the size of this check.
Yeah, exactly.
And and from there, it's like, well, now if I'm going to move forward, I need to be intentional. And how do I do that? And that's when you start to make this business legal, right? So that's when you start to check out your Secretary of State and figure out what business type of corporate structures you're going to create. But you also, in doing that, you want to consult a CPA because there are tax implications based upon whatever corporate structure you choose. So you want to make sure that you're doing the right one to be advantageous to yourself.
Yeah.
And then you want to come up with SOPs, standard operating procedures and all of these things, to where, again, you have a business and you don't have just I'm owning another hobby or I'm owning another job per se, but having a business that, you can really make that impact and income. Because what I say is, getting a check is cool, but that shouldn't be your greatest motivation. It should be taking your why for why you became an educator and looking how can you expand that outside of the walls of your classroom or your school district.
So what are educators telling you now? I mean, you feel like educators are asking more about creating, an opportunity on the side for themselves, or what are, because you get lots of messages, I know.
Yeah, it's becoming hot. When I first started this thing, it wasn't, people were, I had a couple of people come at me a couple of times. One dude in Vox was like, "Hey," and I was like, "Hey, don't come at me like that."
What was his criticism?
He was saying how you always talk about money. Would you do anything for money?
Oh dear! Like, well, I'm not going to go on Survivor. How about you?
Right. Well, a lot. Well, no, and a lot of other stuff I wouldn't do either.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
My thing with him was I'm not in these streets to do this for free, right?
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is when you get on Twitter or these social media sites and you start to go to these conferences, it's easy to get connected with a lot of these ed tech companies, right?
Yeah.
And then these ed tech companies will have these ambassador programs and all these things. And then you get in there and then, it's cool to feel like they selected me, I'm part of the cool, thing. And you get a badge, a certificate or whatever, some stickers. And you're like, hey, but you're not getting a check, but they want you to present at the conference. They want you to lead a Twitter chat. They want you to do all of these things. And all you're doing is just bolstering their brand and you're not getting a check. And that was one of the things that I started to push back on and talk about and say, listen, if they're going to take your IP, if they're going to take your work, they're going to take your experiences, they're going to take your gems that you're actually using as a practitioner in your classroom, they need to compensate you with a check and not give you a T-shirt. And, again, that's when
I agree with that.
He was pushing
I
back.
agree with that. Well, there's you just do it for the nobility or whatever. But here's the deal. The ed tech company that they're making you the ambassador for, and you're sharing and you're giving them all of this marketing, because word of mouth marketing is the way of marketing. It's the only way that works. When you're providing them a benefit, we know that teachers already don't make enough. And if you're doing that extra work, you deserve to be compensated. I mean, I don't have any apology for that,
Hey, neither do I. And that's why I told him, I said, hey, slow your roll. Because, I told them that it's just not in me to just give this away for free. And I can understand again in the beginning, because I felt the same way. In the beginning, they come out to you, they reach out to you, it can feel flattering. But once they start asking for you to do these things, and it took me a while to go, hey, I need me a little money for you to be asking me to be giving you these things, especially, you're not only taking up my time, you are taking up, again, my IP.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's where the pushback came, because I even went to an ISTE once, and I saw doing the hashtags in the morning, there were people talking about, why are these people talking about their consultants or they're doing this and all that? And I was like, hey, what's going on here? And I had to jump in and say, why do you expect someone to get out there and to just give you a lesson plan for free, or to speak for free, or to do this for free? Because you don't show up to your own job for free. So why should I do these other things for free? And that's where, when you ask me, is it changing? Yes, because I see more people now saying, let me start a TPT store, or let me write a book, or let me consult, let me coach, let me create a mastermind. They're starting to understand that there is benefit in ownership.
Well, through the years, as these companies have hired me, Canva, I did work for them in their first month or so, developing lesson plans, or Edpuzzle in their early days, or lots of different companies that have been along my own journey. The content that I have taken the time to create, as well as when I create content for a company, I'm also giving them feedback, because I kind of have a rule that I'm only going to tell the truth. I'm only going to speak from my experience. And sometimes there's been a company that they wanted me to do work for them, and they just weren't there yet. And I said, listen, here's all my feedback. I'm not going to blog publicly about your product until these are the things you fix, and we can just move on and but it makes them better. It makes me better. I'm continually asking questions. How does this relate to the real classroom? So I feel like when you have a good relationship, this is not just you're paying me and you're telling me what to say. This is like a relationship that's mutually beneficial when ed tech companies really understand how to partner with classroom teachers, and your district will allow it, because aren't there some districts that don't allow it?
Yes, because there could be a conflict of interest, and especially if you are in a position where you influence whether or not a school district purchases the product.
Yes.
So I have never done anything with an ed tech company that required where I was given compensation for a product that we use. Now, I have done Schoology training and consulting for an outside entity, and where I was like, hey, I need you to give me a Schoology shell so I can go in and create this course, so I can go in and create these activities to use doing my training. But, I make sure that I'm not in here working with someone who's working with my school district, because I can't get caught up in something where it can even seem remotely inappropriate.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you go into that in your book in terms of conflict of interest, in terms of disclosure. For example, ISTE is doing a much better job, I think, of requiring disclosures of, hey, did somebody pay for your airfare? Did somebody pay for this? Did somebody pay for that? Because, sometimes I've been to panels and then I find out that the whole panel was sent there by these companies. And then you're like, as long as you disclose it, it's okay. It's when you find out kind of after the fact that you're kind of like, okay, nobody likes to feel taken advantage of or snowed, It just doesn't feel right. We were supposed to be better than that. So we've been talking for a while, but can you just speak to the educator driving in their car, listening to us talk, going, okay, I do have things to share, but can anybody do this? Like, a lot of educators I know feel like they don't have a business background, so they're afraid. Can they pick your book up and you just guide them through the process? How does this work?
Definitely. My book starts out with asking yourself, are you ready to make this happen? And I even talk about sort of how I stumbled into doing this. And then the book goes into business formation, as I mentioned earlier. And it breaks down all of the different corporate structures that you create, the advantages and disadvantages, goes into creating a lean canvas business plan where it's a one-sheet pager on how do you sort of set up what your business is going to look like without you having to create a traditional standard business plan, which can be pages and pages and pages. I talk about insurance because a lot of people don't even think about business insurance. Also going to niching down, content marketing, where, as you are creating this podcast, I have a podcast and other people are creating content, that you use this content to be thought of as a content leader so that you can start to build know, like, and trust factor to people out there, especially decision makers who can bring you in, whether it be a conference or school district. You want to create content that shows your expertise and your authority and what your niche is going to be, and also how you create your signature offer, right? So, you're not Walmart, so you can't just get out there and say, well, hey, I'm doing all of this, and understanding that you have to be the cheat code, right? No, no one is paying you for information because they got Google for that. They are paying you to solve a specific problem. So you are the cheat code to that problem, right? And so, and I talk about IP, right? And ownership. So even with teachers, that you need to understand who's listening to this, anything that you create on your district laptop, they own it.
Yep.
Right? So that lesson plan, that activity, that poster, that anchor chart, whatever, they own it. So in the book, I encourage all teachers, and I'm not in your pockets, I'm not in your wallet, I don't know your money situation, but go ahead and buy yourself a laptop or an iPad, et cetera, where you can create things that you actually own and that your district cannot claim any ownership to, right? And there's like a sample sort of information of how you create a contract, and then what goes into that contract. I the book goes in depth, and I have some firsthand accounts. So I have what I call contributing authors, people that I have interviewed specifically for this project, and I have firsthand accounts to kind of break up sort of the information that I'm giving so that you can hear from someone else who says, this is my experience. So you just want to make sure that how I got started, or this is my experience. You have the capacity, right, to control whatever you own and you create. So that podcast, those activities, those lessons, those units, those resources for TPT, if you're going to write a book, if you're going to create a vlog, if you're going to be doing these instructional videos, anything you do, you want to make sure that you actually own it. And that means owning the equipment that you are creating that on. And so do not use your school issued devices, equipment to do so, right? And make sure that you make those critical investments in yourself. So if you need to get a business coach, do so. Make sure you get a CPA, because just going to H&R Block ain't gonna cut it. Because look, you really need to understand what is a true business deduction and the business expense, and not get caught off during tax season. Because I can tell you from personal hand experience that when the checks come in, they look good, but nothing was taken out. So when you go up to do your taxes, where you do this quarterly because you got a bookkeeper, et cetera, or you do it at the end of the year, Uncle Sam's going to get their money. And so you need to understand how you can pay what you need to pay, because you can't get away from not paying, but making sure that you are have the right deductions to make sure that your business is operating.
Thank you for that, Dr. Wills. As we wrap up today's overview, we have to remember that everybody has a personal brand. John, I just want to pull something out here, because you and I talk a lot about how many people in your generation are not going on social media, but they're on Discord and they're on some of these other places. Like, is that a personal brand?
It is in a way, but it's more concentrated to the people that know you on those sites. My generation tries to get community in a way that was missing from those wider social media sites where everyone was seeing all the same content versus having a tighter group of people you can actually get to know. But another thing that can happen is people will still do the same things on wider social media that they do in group chats. And group chats can get leaked and they'll still have that exposed to the wider internet.
So there are memes about, oh no, the group chat got leaked and what are we going to do? So, the thing is everything digital can be shared. And so we have to be intentional. It needs to reflect who we are, but highlight our strengths. We need to know that people will look us up. They will see who we are. John, we talked about some kinds of branding. You've talked to me in production about something called brain rot.
Brain rot content. It's content you can basically turn your brain off to. You don't have to think about it. People associate it with very low IQ and lowbrow humor.
But there are a lot of people who do that and just ride the trends, and that's a short-term strategy. You might get a lot of views and you might get some followers out of it, but it may not be the long-term thing people are looking for. And in fact, sometimes when that type of content crashes, like the person crashes, right?
That type of content is not conducive to one's mental health.
We become like the people we hang around, the books we read, and the places we go. And so we want to be strategic about who we follow. I mean, there's times on social media that I'll take a break from a person.
We become what we behold.
So as we move forward to the next episode, we're going to explore some practical tips, tools, and strategies for effective personal branding. How did I pick what I was going to do? Because you're different from me and you have your own passions and your own views. And then how do you coach your child or your students as they're talking about this? Because sometimes things happen. I remember just recently I was walking with a student and some other students were like, oh, I saw your video. And she turned to me and she's like, oh, I went viral yesterday, like literally viral. And all the other kids were just in awe of this other student. I remember when I went to Moscow and spoke at their conference and they had a popular YouTuber. I could hear the people in the audience that weren't speaking Russian, that were speaking English, saying, oh, that's just what I want to be. That's everybody's dream, is to be a popular YouTuber. And I'm thinking, wow, that's so temporary because popularity comes and goes. It's about who are you as a person. A lot of people can't handle fame if they have it. But this, quote, famous or internet famous can be really harmful because what happens after you go viral? You go viral once. I've always wondered, the woman who did the Chewbacca mask, I kept seeing her post videos doing other stuff because she couldn't go that viral again. And I'm thinking, well, is she going to have an awesome life because she went viral once? Is she going to spend the rest of her life trying to do that again?
They'll be proto-celebrities for the rest of their life. They'll be seen on the street. People are going to be like, you're that guy, or oh, you're that lady. And that'll be all you are.
Is that what you want to be? So I'm excited about this series. I do think it'll be helpful for all of you who are sharing and creating and even just casual social media use if you want to see behind the curtain of what it looks like. So all of these episodes will be uploaded and shared at coolcatteacher.com/brand tips. So until next time, this is Vicki Davis.
And John. Stay in the loop. Visit coolcatteacher.com.
I'd also like to mention that Cool Cat Teacher Talk is now a podcast. So subscribe in your favorite podcatcher. See you later, educator.